Welcome to another segment of the Illuminated Herbalism Summit, where we are exploring the relationship between herbal medicine and spirituality. I'm your host, David Crow. And in this segment, I'm very pleased to introduce my co-host on this summit. Selima Harleston Lust is co-founder of Iwilla Remedy, passionate about helping people travel the most graceful path from illness to health. Selima bridges the gaps between your body, your consciousness, and your soul's evolution. So, Selima, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being the co-host on this summit and all of the wonderful interviews that you have been doing. And let's talk about your favorite topic now. This is your time. And that is titled Spirit to Spirit, Deepening Your Relationship with Plants. Wonderful title, Spirit to Spirit. So just to get things started, what does that mean to you, Spirit to Spirit?
I love that as an opening question. You know, it means the word that really sticks out is alignment, and how we can use our plant practices and our plant allies and our plant friends as helpers in us achieving alignment with ourselves. So that means that we are in partnership with them beyond how they support us physically. But it's like they are consciousness, they are real, and they are powerful, and they are beings, and they are threads of the divine and of source. And we can partner, we can collaborate, we can co-create so that because plants are doing great, but humans, we, on the other hand, we need a lot of support.
All right, partnership, working with the plants. Now, to set a little context here, you are a clinical herbalist, and you have created this company, Iwilla Remedy, and you offer various services. And just to let people know what you are doing in the world of plant medicine, tell us a little bit about what you do, kind of cases that you work with, the kinds of things that you specialize and so forth, just to give us a little professional background of what you're doing with plant medicine.
Absolutely. So, and even to give background further than that, I really came into this journey in a way that many people do, through having my own physical health challenges that I wasn't receiving support for in the way that I thought I should be, where the expectation offered to me, or the solutions offered to me, were, you're going to be in chiropractic care for the rest of your life, or you're going to need to take this for the rest of your life. And I'm like, that can't be the solution. That can't be my only option. So it was really, my wife and I, we started on this holistic healing journey, and along the way, deepening into herbalism and kind of realizing that I just never stopped. I never stopped, and it continued to grasp my attention and to hold me. And there were just so many powerful moments of real, just the healing continued, but the joy continued. And I realized a lot of my physical symptoms were related to trauma. And when that opened up, it was just a whole new path of joy, and true pain relief opened up. And so we launched our company initially with body care. That was over 12 years ago. And now we're really, I feel like, in the center of our work, which is education. I really believe that people need to know more about the options that are available to them when it comes to their care. So we offer herbal medicine formulations that I've created and developed over the years. A lot of what we do, though, is teaching through courses, through a lifetime mentorship program called Herbal Medicine for the Soul, where people can come in, and we call it like, this is your personal home for your own healing journey. And this can also be your herbal training program. And it is this combination of spiritual practice, herbal medicine, clinical work, case studies, and ongoing calls and continuing education, because I stay in the work. I stay just talking to the plants and learning from them, and then learning more, of course, always about the body, physiology, biology, chemistry, all the sciences. And so everything that I continue to learn, I pour right back into the students. And one of the greatest, like, benefits of the work is seeing people flourish, seeing people shine, seeing people say, you know what, I made this for me. And then my cousin asked for it, my neighbor asked for it, my sister asked for it, and I gave it to them too. And I'm like, plants want to be shared. The option of plant medicine, it's so abundant. Nature wants to be shared. And so we just have these threads. We can return to that, like, every family has an herbalist, everyone has their own herbal book of recipes. These were our traditions across cultures. And it's like, let's return to that, because there's so much healing support available to all of us. So that's a snapshot of what we do.
Right. Wonderful. Well, you said a few things there that definitely raised more questions. And one of them is that there was a turning point in your health, and something opened up, and all of a sudden you were on a completely different journey and your health was completely transformed. Tell us more about that. What was this turning point? How did it happen? And how can other people do that?
Right? That's the question, right? Is the how. And that's so much a part of our teachings too. And that turning point, I had a lot of physical, inexplicable, like non-connected to a diagnosis of just physical pains, probably very close to receiving a fibromyalgia diagnosis. I had digestive issues since growing up, thought it was lactose intolerance as a child. That wasn't it. Really terrible periods. Really bad adult acne along my arms, my back, my chest. Going to the chiropractor 3 times a week for years. Like, that was a lot of money. I've gone to the chiropractor for years. And the turning point, of course, we do all of the things that many people do, where it's like you start to learn more. So you improve your diet. I had a wonderful friend. She's still a dear friend of mine, Nico, who kept inviting me to yoga. And finally, through their persistence, I was like, okay, being open, right? Like, okay. And I really did have to admit that after that first class, I was like, I feel amazing. I feel in a way that I have not been able to access inside of my body in a very long time. And and also, like, studying plants, inviting more of them through infusions, just experimenting, kind of doing, all of the internet searching that people do that can lead you down some helpful roads, but also some non-helpful roads. I'm thankful that most of mine were quite helpful. And it was just I just followed the breadcrumbs, which was greater. I just started feeling better. Honestly, I just started feeling better and better and better. And then it's actually through the plant communion process that I do want to share that I learned about and was able to face and had the courage to face of the childhood trauma that I grew up with and the environment that I grew up with. That was really, for me, the biggest revelation to help me understand why I was in all of this physical pain. And once I went through the process of saying, okay, I'm going to work on this, everything got better. I feel younger in my body. How old am I? I am 41. I feel younger and more vibrant and move better than I did when I was 25.
So this is really important, that the key that really unlocked everything was not necessarily the diet or the yoga or things like that. It was really the work you did on the trauma. And I think in many cases, that is absolutely the key. And I would like to know, before expounding on this, exploring this a little bit further, what was it ultimately that gave you a really clear sense of being liberated from that? Because we know, as practitioners working with people, that people work on past stuff endlessly, and it doesn't seem to go away. And it doesn't seem to produce the same kind of dramatic improvement in health. Now, sometimes it will, absolutely. Sometimes there's a breakthrough experience, a release, and then a person is really truly transformed. But many times people are working on themselves, whether it's trauma or whether it's spiritual practices or whether it's self-cultivation or, working on their personalities, doing so much work on themselves, and it's not producing any change at a physical level. And therefore, you have had this experience where it did produce a dramatic change. And so what was the key to that? What exactly do you think transformed you in this case that is not working in other people's cases?
That's such a great question. I think it's twofold. I think I definitely credit plant work for helping me save my life because prior to, developing a relationship with plants and therefore intuition, I wasn't able to access the parts of me that were ultimately holding me back. Like I was a very different person than I am now, shut off, cold. But I knew that there was this loving aspect of me, but she really felt outside of me, very much so disassociated because it wasn't safe for me to be inside of my body. And plants were the guides that helped me remember safety and remember belonging. Like I feel like I had to have this outward community, which was the plants that helped me remember my true nature. And then I could begin to develop loving relationships in which I could be vulnerable and open and safe with people, right? So the plants are these just road openers for us. And it's so gentle and it's so graceful. And it can be subtle if we don't pay attention. But there's always this new invitation to just show up in a different way. And they helped me really be clear about what my triggers were. And that mindfulness of knowing, in the moment, I'm having a conversation, I'm talking about my childhood, I'm remembering this thing. Okay, now's the moment when I don't retreat, when I don't shut down, and like we have to be really deliberate in those moments so that we start to break the cycles. So we really do start to break the cycles. And plants were the primer for that, of just developing this courage, feeling physically stronger in my body, but also feeling more mentally, just like I'm smart, but like just more mentally present, more and more emotionally centered, more tuned in. I think that plants gift us with sensitivity, like new types of sensitivities where like I'm aware in a deeper way and it's not fearful for me to be in that way. And then the other part, and this is something that, we share really openly as well, is that my wife and I developed this method for being able to dive into these big emotional spaces. And we call it the Calypso healing method. And it's an acronym that stands for C stands for check your triggers. A stands for ask for the lesson. L is listen for the answers. Y is yearn for the root. P is pain or purpose. And that's a question, a very deliberate question. It's the crossroads. It's the fork in the road, right? Which way do I want to go? S is step into solutions. And then O is outshine your former self. So to answer the other part of your question, I think that a lot of people, so this is kind of like our personal development method. I think a lot of people can get themselves through check your triggers, ask for the lesson, listen for the answers, yearn for the root, and pain a purpose. That's this fork in the road where we have to decide and be very deliberate about choosing which path we're going to take. Because the path of succumbing to triggers, whatever that looks like for people, whatever people are triggered by or frustrated by, or just feel like this is a constant challenge, it really doesn't matter, what it is. We can choose to respond in the same way that we always choose. And we know how that's going to play out. Or we can say, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to reach, and it is a reach. I'm going to reach for another response. And with that practice, that habit, you start to create distance between who you were. And you start to get closer to, I believe everyone has a vision of like self-actualization of who that we are, who we know we are inside. This is not about society's standards of success, but it's like who I know I really am. Like I knew inside that I was a very loving person, that I was compassionate, I knew that I could feel, I knew I could build deep and lasting bonds with others, but she felt really far away. And so in those moments, in those mindful moments, but also in those very decisive and deliberate moments, I had to choose, like, reach for, well, what would that Selima do? Because that Selima is not going to shut down because I already know that response. And it leads me feeling the same disconnected and disassociated way and in the same pain. So I'm going to reach for something different. And that connects our plant work too, because they are guides, where that next idea, especially if you are along this road and within our Calypso healing method, you've established some type of introspective practice. You can call it meditation, you can call it journaling, nature walks, whatever it is, whatever that practice is that helps you connect with you, then you're honing and you're trusting and you're cultivating your intuition. So that next step, all you have to do is reach your hand and it will be right there. And the more we keep doing that, we move ourselves further away from who we used to be. And I think the outshine your former self is staying in the practice of that. I'm going to continue to keep expanding my comfort zone, reaching for things that are more in alignment with my well-being. And I think that answers the question. Essentially, what you were asking is, how do people let it go? You let it go partly by stop picking it back up.
Excellent. And beautiful definition of the solution there. So I am going to be telling people about your website later. And is the Calypso healing method described there?
It is. Tammy offers Calypso healing method hot seat coaching, or we do hot seats rather, in our mentorship program. We also have a robust library of YouTube videos where I break down each step of the Calypso healing method. Tammy does it as well because it's very flexible and it's intended to be a process that you can do anywhere. Because one thing that I did learn in healing trauma is triggers aren't convenient. It's not like, okay, here we go. Next Tuesday, trigger, here we're about to box. It's like, no, they come up in the most inconvenient moments. And once you know those steps, you can do them while you're at your desk, at work. If something happens, you can do them and not lash out and cut off that driver or flick off that driver that just cut you off. And so we both have examples of our own stories of using this method in practice in our daily lives. And we teach it to our students as well, because we want it to be out there. And we just got it trademarked, which is like, okay. But we freely give it because we think it's something a practice that people need to be able to do on their own. We can't always pick up the phone and call a therapist or pick up the phone and call a friend, but we can always reach for our internal resources.
Nice. Say it again.
Oh, Calypso healing method.
And the meaning of the letters?
C stands for check your triggers. A is ask for the lesson. Yeah. Y is L. L is listen for the answers. So I can even add nuance there. We ask all the time. We pray all the time. So many people don't sit down long enough to listen. to receive the answers. And there's solutions that are around us all the time. The universe is abundant with solutions. And so listen for the answers is really cultivating that practice of stillness, of quiet, of self-reflection, of meditation, whatever you want to call it, but it's making yourself available to receive that which you've asked for. Yearn for the root. So this is an interesting step because, and I can use myself as an example where I understood that the triggers in my body were related to my childhood and the abuse that I experienced in my childhood, but all of the memories were not there. And so in my yearn for the root phase or step, I really wanted to know what happened, essentially. Like, I want to know what happened to me. And this was an important step because 10 years prior, I remember in college going next door, across the hall to my friend's room and kind of like flopping on her bed and saying, I think something else happened to me in my childhood, but I'm not ready to know what. I was 18. It wasn't until 28 where I was very deliberate in this step of saying, I'm ready. I need to know. Not everybody needs to know, right? All the things, but this was a very important part of my journey. Was like, I need to know what happened to me because I'm behaving from this place and I don't understand why. So in that yearn for the root, that's when repressed memories started to rise to the surface. And then we have pain or purpose, which is that question mark. What am I going to do? Right. And I remember I woke up from a dream. The memory had resurfaced. I knew exactly what happened. And honestly, I was relieved because now I knew what to heal. Like I knew what to work on. There was no longer just this big question mark. It was like, oh, okay, I need to work on this sexual abuse. Got it. Because now before then, I'm on this merry-go-round of let me try to chase healing this pain, and now this pain, and now this pain, and now this pain. And now it's like, I have focus and I had clarity. And it really was because I had so much understanding of how I was behaving. It really was a very clear decision of like, oh, I'm going to heal this. And I am going to do whatever it takes to do. I'm going to do everything that it takes to do that because I already know what it feels like to be angry, what it feels like to be frustrated, what it feels like to be in pain. And so I knew that the path of resentment, lashing out, because we can always decide like, I want to hold on to this pain or I want to let it go. And I just played that out, what holding it on looked like. And I just said, you know what? I have suffered enough. So whatever it takes, this is the path I'm walking into. And step into solutions that rises to the surface for each person. It's individual, but it comes from that cultivation of some type of stillness practice because we need to be able to listen to ourselves to say, okay, I should work on this. I knew I needed to work on my voice. Oh, and then outshine your former self.
Nice. Great. And I can see how this is a system that everybody needs. It doesn't matter whether they have had a background of trauma that they need to uncover and deal with and take care of their triggers and all of that. I can see that this is something that everybody needs. Everybody's getting triggered even without a traumatic background. And everybody needs to open themselves up and listen to solutions and outshine themselves. So on the one hand, I can see that this system is universally beneficial for everyone as a healing method, and self-knowledge and self-inquiry and mindfulness and awareness of who we are and how we are. But I can also see how for a lot of people, this would not produce the same kind of effects that it produced for you. And therefore, it opens up the broader discussion about how do we integrate herbal medicine with spiritual practice when working on ourselves spiritually is not giving us the results that we need or that we want. And I'm sure that you share this perspective that I have from my clinical practice, from your clinical practice, and that is that many people do a lot of work on themselves. And many times the problem is not at this particular level. Now, this system, I think, is brilliant and helpful for everyone. But I also know that there are things that are happening in other levels that need to be addressed in other kinds of ways. And one of the things that I think of here is that so many unpleasant mental and emotional states arise because of toxicity and inflammation and pain in the body. And people think that because it is arising as mental and emotional states, that they have to work on it mentally and emotionally, whereas in actuality, that morning anxiety is really nothing more than the inflammation in your colon at that particular time of day. And that seems to be a real revelation for a lot of people, is that the trauma keeps getting activated because of the body sensations, rather than the body sensations are activated by the trauma. And so it goes both ways, but I think that it's kind of an overlooked thing, that there's a lot of emphasis in working on ourselves. But many times people seem to be greatly relieved to find out there's nothing really wrong with them, except that they've got these really unpleasant things happening in the body. So how do you approach this in your clinical practice, or do you?
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion, a great question. And I never want people to feel like, I'm a project. Like I am a project that I constantly have to work on at getting better, doing better, being better. And I think that a lot of people do feel that way. And I definitely felt like in the midst of healing trauma that I was like, this is a big project. And eventually it became this like, no more. Like I know the context of many of my behaviors and I got it. And now we're moving on to I have other aspirations. And so there is that element. And I think it works really well. We love the Calypso healing method with our herbal medicine and our plant practice, and thinking of these practices working in tandem. And that herbal medicine, like I have a plant practice where I'm always working with plants. And it's kind of twofold in the sense that there's these spiritual teachings and understanding and the gateway and the portals to ourselves that plants open within us. And then there are the nuts and bolts of understanding, where do I need greater nourishment? Where do I need to address with the application of medicine the inflammation or whatever symptom that I'm experiencing? How can I get to know my body and my constitution better? It's definitely not separate. They work in tandem. And I think like your practice is robust in that way too, where it's like wherever people are, we're working with you from that place. Where some people come in and they have amazing diets and they have spiritual practices, but maybe they're missing just fulfillment, where it's like you need joy, like you probably need to go and play. And then there are other people who like the priority is deep physical healing. And I think we always get to the spiritual because that's so much of how I work. But if it's like, if we're working from the beginning stages of someone is on a sad standard American diet, well, explaining to them how that diet, first and foremost, is impacting not just their physiology, but their mental state as well. So I think having those deeper conversations we have to have, because people don't necessarily understand the interconnections of all of it, and that it can be this pathway of like your gut health is determining your mental health, and your mental health is affecting your gut health. And so I think it's really rich conversations, and people can find the thread or just find their starting point within the work.
Excellent. Okay, well, there's a few points that are outlined here on your page that I absolutely want to cover. And let's just go through these and just open this up because they're all closely related. But the two primary things here that we should delve into is how to discover and work with your plant allies through a plant communion. And then, closely related to that, what to expect when you invite plants to be your guides. And so, what is a plant communion and what should we expect?
And so I deeply believe that each plant that we work with, it has medicine for us. Each plant that calls us forward, is a mentor, is a guide, is a companion, a personal messenger. And at every stage of our journey, the plants can offer unique and very specific messages for us so that, our time in these bodies is more graceful. So while the therapeutic benefits of plants, they're plentiful, they're proven, what I've come to appreciate most are those profound ways that plants shift our consciousness. Hawthorn opened my heart to extend compassion to my abuser. Dandelion taught me how to open my mouth and speak without fear of punishment. Burdock revived a part of me that was buried underneath layers of just anger and shame. And Motherwort showed me how to nurture myself. Mullein, which I'm currently working with, is just teaching me how to stand tall, stay engaged, not shrink. I could really go on and on about the gifts that have been bestowed on me by plants, because in many ways, again, like I've said, they literally helped me save my life. And so lots of people, I think we can all have this type of relationship with plants. But how do we build this type of connection? How do we become more receptive to their teachings? I think that many people, particularly in our audience, are not new to the idea of building a relationship. Maybe they've heard someone speaking about, working with a single plant for months or years at a time. And so my process, 'cause I like to share process and I like for it to be practical. It's a process I learned from my teacher, but I've heard so many people express the same idea. And I also teach it to my herbal medicine for the soul students, and it's called a plant communion. So one of the definitions of communion is intimate fellowship. So if you have any experience with going to church, then you know that Communion Sunday is a big deal. And I don't know about other churches, but on Communion Sunday in a Black church, you already know you're going to be there for at least an extra hour. So we know communion, in addition to like building that intimacy, is a time of breaking bread with one another. It's a ritual that symbolizes our spiritual union with each other, with source energy, divine, God, whatever you want to call it. And so a plant communion represents this same intimacy. It's an intimate relationship you establish with a plant that attunes you to the larger whole of creation, which in turn helps you learn more about yourself, helps you be a better human. It's a symbol, it's an act of your union, like the union of yourself, of your personality with your spirit. A plant communion is a practice that you use, of course, to help on your healing journey, but more importantly, to help with your spiritual growth. So it's a dedicated time of working with one specific plant. For 3 months is a good start. Longer, you're going to work with your plant, you're going to learn about it. And most importantly, you're going to observe and embrace the changes it brings forth in you. So it's a loose process, but I know many folks are intellectually leaning. So my general guidelines are step one, choose your plant, but this is not a mental exercise, not a mental exercise at all. This is an intuitive step or a following of your curiosity. So here's what we're not going to do. We are not going to look up a plant for an ailment that you might be experiencing. That part is going to be taken care of. And the plant, honestly, it has already chosen you. And so what we're doing is gently allowing that plant's energy to rise to the surface of our awareness. And this is you're beginning that work of being receptive. And through the process, you'll understand why this plant is coming into your life. But the plant has definitely already chosen you. Perhaps just for our listeners, a plant might be coming to mind, this can be a very great indication of, let's start your first plant communion with this plant. You can look through your spices, you can walk through a garden, view a list of plants, pull a card from a beautiful plant deck, walk outside, see if there's a plant that jumps out at you. Maybe there's a plant that's been showing up in your dreams or even on your social media feed. So I always know which plant to work with next when I keep seeing it. And on my drive home from our office, there's a 6-foot tall mullein. Every time I see it, I drive by, I slow down. I can't help but say, hey, I've gone so far as to park the car just to spend some time with the plant. And this summer, so that's message number 1. This summer, we planted a mullein in our yard, and it took previous summers, it did not survive the Georgia clay. So that's message number 2. And then I recently traveled to New York for a trip. And before my trip, as I was packing, I just kept hearing, pack mullein, pack mullein, pack mullein. It's like, okay. So I strained my fresh mullein tincture that I made, I think in 2021. I brought a little dropper bottle with me. And the day I arrived, my hosts were talking about the air quality. And that's when all of the intuitive messages they made complete and total sense. The wildfires were way more present in their experience, obviously living in New York, than they were in mine living in Georgia. And many of you know, mullein is an excellent herb supported for the respiratory system. So that's message number 3. Not only was I prepared, I was protected. So you might find yourself experiencing synchronicities like this, or you can simply ask, what plant would like to work with me? And once you are clear on the plant you'll be working with for 3 months, set an intention. Set an intention for your time together. It can be as simple as setting an intention to be open or to gain clarity. Or if there's something that you've been working through, maybe it's repairing a relationship or considering a new career path, or if you're feeling stuck, set an intention to receive guidance or courage. And so when I first began my herbal studies, like I mentioned, I was a very different person. And so my first intention was to be able to access the love that I knew was capable of me. And my plant was hawthorn. One of our premier herbs for the heart, for the cardiovascular system, and also its work on the heart chakra. It helps us to open up and to really be active participants in the exchange of giving and receiving love. So that was my intention with hawthorn. So now you have your plant, you've set an intention, get a journal. Many people may be resistant to this. If you don't already have a journal practice, maybe you're not a writer, you can keep voice notes or video notes. You're going to want to document the journey. This goes back to the medicine that's for you, and the gifts in this relationship are for you. You're going to want to remember them, and they are unique to you. And you want to just document your days as you normally would. And when you review the whole journey, you'll get to remember where you started and see how much you've changed, how much you've shifted in this process. Many people who talked about this turn to herbal medicine when they're in pain or needing physical support. So they're looking for results and changes in the body. But I've just seen time and time again, of course, with myself, with students and clients, that many changes happen internally in our emotional spaces before we feel shifts in the physical body. And so we have to remember, and I think documenting helps us remember that when we show up to the next interaction with more awareness, that's healing. When we're agitated and we choose to pause instead of lash out like we normally do, that's healing. When perhaps you need to prepare a presentation for work, you usually procrastinate, but this time you don't. That too is healing. So that documenting your process really helps you understand how you're shifting in your day-to-day, where it could be really easy to kind of let those subtle shifts float by without your acknowledgement. And the fun part is the plant play. So, and I say play intentionally because this is meant to be an exercise or practice in discovery. It's not another item to add to everyone's already too long to-do list. And this is the communing part, spending time with your plant friend every day in some way, inviting it to be a part of your life, just like in building a relationship with another human or an animal friend. You spend time, you share space. And this is also where you can express your creativity. Sometimes I keep it very simple. I'm still taking my mullein tincture, or I drink an infusion every day. And now is when you have permission to research. Not in the first step of choosing. I've never found a person or experienced a person choosing a wrong plant because it's already chosen them. But now you can research it, learn more about it, from the folklore to the scientific information, dive as deeply as you would like to. And especially if you want to take it internally, research for contraindications. And you don't have to take it internally or ingest it in therapeutic doses. You can microdose, you can make external preparations like baths and dream pillows, body care, floor washes, bundles. It's like really an opportunity to get creative and to also ask the plant. There are many ways to play. Grow it in your garden if you're able to, add it to food, carry it around. It's like right now, our 8-year-old son he's working through nightmares, and he wanted to make a lavender dream pillow. And so he carries it around the house. He smells it throughout the day. He definitely makes sure that he has it at night by his pillow. And I'm realizing wow, he's in his first plant communion. He chose it, or it chose him. And hopefully this will be one of his core plant memories. So that's the general, loose, but guided process for people.
Awesome. Wonderful. Great teachings. Thank you. You started off mentioning something that's really important here that is found in classical medical systems like Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. But it's not really articulated very well in Western herbology yet, but you started articulating it, and that is that plants heal things on mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological levels also. And you gave the example of the hawthorn and forgiveness and love and things like that. Now, that's not what hawthorn is known for. It's known for its flavonoid compounds that strengthen the heart muscle. But we find examples in medical systems where the plant is actually named because of that kind of power, like calamus, vacha in Ayurveda, speech. It's a plant that gives power of speech, or Brahmi, which comes from the word Brahma, and the herb is supported for brain and cognitive function. So we see these kind of things. And you mentioned that you had so many other examples of that. I'm curious if you could share a few more before we close, of things that you have seen that plants do that we could add to our understanding of their healing powers, not just physically, but also on these other levels.
Yeah, and this is why I think that the plant communion process is so beautiful, because I think that plants are going to be that individual messenger for each person. This is how we add to the body of work around our plant knowledge. And so we do see in some materia medica what are the spiritual and the magical attributes. And so I was wondering, how did people discover that? And it's they spent time just like they would with a friend. And it's oh, this plant gave me greater access to this emotion. It was a road opener in this way. Goldenrod really helped me big time working through fears. And it's hard to say with all of them, why. We know that goldenrod has an affinity for the kidneys, which holds fear. Cinnamon, it was immediate. It rekindled my fire after giving birth to our son, being in postpartum. And I didn't believe our doula, who said postpartum was 3 years. I was she can't be right. And she really was. But I remember working with cinnamon and the feeling the fire rising. And it's like, and it's really like, was, yes, digestive fire, but it was enthusiasm. Like I'm such, which you can see, I'm such a bubbly and kind of like joyful person and like happy. And I'm like, where did it go? I feel so tired. I feel so tired and so depleted and so drained and like out of my mind all the time. And for me, like I really like feeling inspired, and cinnamon brought that back. And it was like immediate. I didn't have to work with it for 3 months. It was like 3 days. And I'm like, oh, I'm alert. Ideas are coming again. Thank you. Wood Bethany really helped kind of rewire me through growing pains of being more visible in the work. I think that people will have their unique experiences, and that's why I think documenting is so important, so that you can remember. And also just simply meditating with plants, which can be a part of your plant communion process as well. Like I will hold a plant in my hand and get into my centered space. And then I always have paper, and I will write down, I will ask it questions like, what are you here to teach me? What can I offer you? Just anything. How do you want me to play with you? How do you want me to interact with you? How can I honor you? Like there's so many ways that we can receive those individual messages. And then it was interesting, inside of Herbal Medicine for the Soul, we decided to do a 1 month long community plant communion with Tulsi. And so Tulsi, a holy basil, I have such a love for that plant. And it was really interesting for there to be threads of similarities in different students' experiences. And it's like, yes, people felt physical relief. They felt some physical relief and symptoms, digestive symptoms and period symptoms, and even just clearer thinking. And I think something that we do see in the texts around Tulsi is that it helps to align the chakras, and it helps to clear the mind and brings clarity. And what I thought was really, really interesting for people, there was that overarching, we didn't do, or collectively, they probably did do some research, but I told them not to. Like collectively, just play with the plant. But there was this thread of clarity, but it wasn't what I think most people expected. It was clarity around how we were participating in our own challenges. And it was the clarity around what's my behavior that's contributing to this dissatisfaction in various areas of lives for people. And that was just an overarching theme of people's experiences, where it's like we got to see ourselves better, but somewhat at not a disassociated kind of distance, but at a distance where it's like, oh, I see myself playing this pattern out again. And now I have that awareness, and now at pain or purpose, right? And now I can choose, oh, I'm gonna make a different decision here. And so many people did that. And then some people were like, I see it, and I have to stop. I have to stop. It's intense, but I see it. And that's medicine too. Like to be at that state of awareness where you weren't as aware is like, that's illuminating, right? Where it's like, oh, okay. So it was really profound. It's really, really profound. I think that we discover those emotional threads and that emotional healing potential and spiritual healing potential with plants when we work with them individually. Because I know for me, it didn't always connect when I'm reading it in the text. And I'm like, oh, burdock, liver, anger, got it.
I agree. It is very profound. This is a very profound level of herbal medicine. And it's a really good example, actually, of what we have been calling over here at the Shift Network for a while, illuminated herbalism, where we are really looking at, okay, there's herbalism, and then there is the whole person, body, mind, spirit. And how do we integrate these fully so that it's not just thinking in terms of taking curcumin for inflammation? And these examples that you gave are great. They're wonderful. I love this aspect of herbal medicine. So, Selima, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I would like to let people know where they can find you, because I'm sure that everybody is going to want to know how they can spend some more time with you. And so for those of you who would like, Selima's website address, which is also on the page where this video is, you can see it at iwillaremedy.com. And that is Iwilla, I-W-I-L-L-A, Iwilla Remedy, R-E-M-E-D-Y, iwillaremedy.com. So, Selima, any last thoughts before we close?
Remember that you have options. And remember that the shifts with herbal medicine can be very subtle initially, but deeply profound. And they're always inviting you towards yourself. Always.
Beautiful. Well, thank you from me personally for such a wonderful presentation, and from all of us, thank you. Not just for the presentation, but for this incredible work that you are doing. And thank you to your partner also. So deeply appreciated, all of it.
Thank you so much, David. It's been such a wonderful experience co-hosting with you. Thank you for all of the work that you do. And you're a mentor to many, close and afar, and I'm included in that number. And thank you so much.
You are most welcome. Thank you for all of the wonderful interviews and making this summit what it is. And so thank you to all of you who have joined us also. And join us again in another segment of the Illuminated Herbalism Summit.